Hi, everyone. I'm Ashu Tandon. I'm the Vice Chair for Innovation and Director of Cardiovascular Innovation at Cleveland Clinic Children's. And I'm going to tell you some tips for writing career development grants. This talk is on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics Section on Cardiology and Cardiothoracic Surgery, SOCCS, Research Committee. These are my disclosures. So I just wanted to start with one point to note is that there are multiple career development grants. So it's probably worth spending some time at the beginning to figure out which one is the best fit for you. Uh, this can be based on your career stage and research interests. So I'm focusing on the early career development grants, like through the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, including K01, K08, K23. And some of that depends on if you're focusing more on basic science or clinical and translational research. And if you're not sure, get some advice. The American Heart Association also has career development grants. Some disease specific foundations have career development grants. And then your own internal institution might have career development grant. For instance, both UT Southwestern, where I was before, and Cleveland Clinic through Case Western Reserve University have a KL2 program, which is kind of like an internal K award. And then this isn't going into depth, but there are also obviously T32 and F32 awards for earlier stage investigators. Overview. And as of the day of this recording, which is in January 2025, there are 5 scoring criteria for career development grants like the K08 and K23. Um, there's the candidate section, career development plan, and career goals and objectives, the research plan, the mentors plan section, and the environment and institutional commitment to the candidate section. The way the scoring works is that the overall score is some amalgam of these different areas, and it's up to the reviewer to decide how much to weigh each criterion. And so, as with every grant, some of this is relatively arbitrary, but we are trying to think about ways to make your grant application the most compelling that it can be. So I would say probably the biggest overall lesson that I learned about writing MyK was that we have to make everything align, right? So each of those areas, the career trajectory, the research plan, the training plan, mentors and mentorship plan, they should all align. Everything that you need should be there and nothing that you don't need, right? You want to make it easy for the reviewer to read and understand what you're trying to propose. And then you need to make sure not only does it all align, but that it's consistent. So if in one place you say you'll meet every 2 weeks, and then a different place it says you'll meet every 4 weeks, just be consistent about it. And like I said, probably the biggest point is to make it easy for the reviewer. So one of the strategies that I learned from reading a bunch of successful career development grants was to start out the application with a very short 1 or 2 sentence summary about what you're planning to do. So I gave the example of what I wrote in my grant listed here, which was I seek support for further training in image processing and data analytics to develop improved outcome predictors in congenital heart disease. So my long-term goal is this, and this is how I'm going to use the funding from the K to get to that stage. And then, like I mentioned, you can summarize your research aims in 1 or 2 sentences to give the reviewer a broad scope. One of the key things that I think has been helpful both as a reviewer and as an applicant is to give a graphical overview. That's also useful for papers, but that also makes you think and make sure that you know the exact process of what you're trying to plan. And then in the significance and other areas, I tend to highlight the first sentence of every paragraph in the body of the text, so the reviewer knows the point that I'm trying to get across, right? Because you have to remember the reviewers are often reading this after hours or hopefully not, but sometimes on the plane to the review session or right before the virtual review session. And so making it easy for the reviewers to know what it is that you're proposing uh, will really help get the main point across and make it not so confusing. So I'm going to go into each part of the research application, starting with the research plan. So the research section of the K application is probably the one that you're most familiar with because it's pretty much like any other grant that you would write in terms of the research component. You still have to have a good project. And I particularly want to emphasize that the specific aims page is key because it's one page, it's a quick summary of your project, and it might be the only part of your application that every reviewer reads or skims. For non-K awards, the NIH has recently, as of recording in uh, uh, 2025, created a simplified review framework. In terms of significance and innovation, in the new review criteria as of 2025, they've become part of one impact score for R01s. I don't actually know if that's still relevant for the Ks, but uh, they still want you to point out significance and innovation. So in terms of significance, why is this research important? Meaning that let's say that the research was successful and you met all your aims. What will change? What will change for patients? What will change for you? What will change for the field? What will change for society, right? Why is this research important? In terms of innovation, you want to talk about what's novel about this project. And I included two quotes from the review web page, which point out that the definition of innovation is a little bit expansive. So while technical or conceptual innovation can influence the importance of the proposed approach, you can also highlight how you're using an existing technology in a new way or in a new population, and even that counts as novelty. And then one of the things that you can do here is point out why are you the best person for this job? And we talk a lot about that in the candidate section as well. But why are you and your team the best people, the only people who can accomplish this goal, right? What's in your skill set, prior history, training plan, and all the rest of the application that makes you the person that the NIH or whatever agency should fund? Because unless you get the money, this thing isn't going to happen. And in terms of the approach section, part of your goal is to prove that the grant is feasible, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. You need to prove the scientific rigor of the study design in terms of all the parameters that the NIH wants you to do. And just as a note, a 2016 study showed that the best predictor of the overall impact score is the approach score. So people love dinging the approach by saying, oh, you didn't think about this or you didn't think about that. Plan. Uh, Preliminary data is helpful. Some could say required. And it being yours is even more helpful, right? So you, just like with any grant, most of these lessons, you could think about for any research grant to say, um, what, convince the reviewers that what you propose is possible. And so is the process technically feasible? Is it technically feasible if done by you? And will you have enough patients to get the job done, right? So that's where the statistical plan and all that stuff comes in place. Um, but you, as an early career person, you're trying to prove to the reviewers that you have the technical skills or will need to learn the technical skills to get this task done, whatever that task is that you're proposing in the grant. Uh, some potential pitfalls include if you don't have an appropriate limitations and alternative plan section, it makes you seem naive and that you don't know what you're doing, right? What are you going to do if you can't recruit enough patients? What happens if your one machine breaks or something? What's your backup plan so that even if you run into some roadblock in your study, you can still accomplish the aims of the study. So you should think about those. And really, that's also a nice way to say, like, hey, I've really thought this project through, so I know where we might run into trouble and how I'm going to solve that. Okay. One of the unique things about the career development grants are that a lot of it is about you, right? You as the candidate. So here's where you get to sell yourself, right? You have to have a clear career vision. And basically, the way I think about that is like, who or what am I today? And who and what do I want to be in the future? And so it helps to be a little specific, right? Not just, oh, I want to run a lab. Like the goal of the K is to get to your R01, R01 grant. But how are you going to get to that, right? I want to lead the field in shape modeling for congenital heart disease, right? That's was my goal, or is my goal. So what you can do in that scenario is say, okay, well, my career vision is to lead the field in shape modeling for congenital heart disease. Here is how I'm going to get there. And the candidate section and research plan and training plan and all that has to wrap around that theme. So you should talk about where are you now? Professionally, I'm a fellow, I'm a junior faculty, as junior faculty when I applied. You can talk about your research track record. And then you really need to figure out, where do I need to be, right? What skills do I need to acquire to be an independent researcher, right? Because again, the goal of the K grants is to transition you from a trainee grant to an independent grant, right? So what will your initial R01 look like? And given that, how do I need to evolve as a scientist from where I am today to where I will be in 3, 4, 5 years, right? The length of the K, so that I can then apply for independent research funding. And then, what do I need to do? What do I need to go from where I am to where I want to be, right? Um, the research perspective with expected outputs, right? What are you going to do? How are you going to show your legitimacy to the field? And then in terms of the career development, right? What classes or degrees, what special skills, who's going to teach you those special skills? What techniques do you need to learn? And you can highlight these in the career development section as well. Some points to highlight in the candidate section is the evidence of your prior success, which is publications. And then especially publications in the area of interest, especially first or last author. And I think you should make that obvious. So either put it obvious in the text. Sometimes I use the citation method where you put the little superscript numbers, but then it doesn't have your name in it. So if you are the first author, you can use EndNote or Zotero to change the citation for just that one and say, Tandon 2022, and then have the number. And that way it's clear that you are the person who did that research. You also want to make sure you highlight what you've done recently. And then everybody loves proof of a research track record. So highlighting your prior grants, especially external grants, is always helpful. You can do that both in the research plan and you can do it in your biosketch. And then I think you need to justify the need for the training that you're asking for, right? Even if you have extensive research expertise, you can still justify a career development application. What else do you need to learn? So I know PCR, but now I need to learn Western blot. Like for me, I knew cardiac MRI as a clinician, but now I needed to learn image processing techniques. And then sometimes people get nervous about, how will this differ from what the mentor's doing? The main reason that they're asking you that is so that the mentor won't always be the last author, and also so that you can get independent and funding and not be reliant on your mentor forever, right? So the goal again is for you to get independent grants. So you have to show, like, how am I going to learn things from the mentor and then evolve into a place where I'm not dependent on the mentor to continue to fund my work. I will be competitive for my own grants. Just some potential pitfalls. Abstracts are not papers. This has been some criticism I've heard in review sessions in the past. And then if there's a gap in the publication record, then explain it in the biosketch personal statement area. That doesn't always count against you as long as you make clear what happened. Uh, what I wouldn't do is just have a huge gap and not talk about it, because then people are like very confused or they think it's shady. So just explain it. Okay, so let's talk about the career development plan and career goals and objectives section. And it's been pointed out that this might be the most important part of the grant application for a career development grant, because obviously this is an investment in you as an investigator, right? The money that you get for a career development grant isn't so much money to do the research, it's money to protect your time. So you really need to sell why you are the right person to be funded, just as much as, or even more than, why this project is a good project. Um, in terms of the career development plan, I think the career goals should be judiciously ambitious, right? Make them achievable and not just aspirational, I guess. Uh, I would suggest that they align with the research and training plans, right? Like, be specific about what you learn, be specific about benchmarks and marking progress. And I think having tables and charts and stuff like that that are easy to digest for the reviewer seems to go over well. Remember that you can propose a number of different categories of training. You can do didactic training. You can talk about hands-on training. Some things that many centers provide is training and writing grants, right? Like lots of centers have internal grant review and grant writing classes that stretch over a couple months. And then you can even talk about training in terms of how to lead a team, right? You can say, hey, I'm going to get some skills in team development and team functionality. And then you're depending on what your career goals are, you can and should consider things that go beyond the wet lab or the bench, right? You can think about learning implementation science or learning qualitative research or learning about community outreach, and the local clinical and translational science centers might have some resources to help with that kind of career development. I would say the biggest pitfall in this section might be if your aims and career plan and career development don't align, right? You talk about, oh, I'm going to learn how to do PCR, but then in the research plan, you're talking about something that doesn't need PCR. Why are you doing that, right? Why do you need to learn this skill if you're not going to use it in your research? So make sure they align, like we talked about before. All right. Um, Talking about mentors and co-mentors, right? Your mentorship team. Again, this is a unique grant compared to R01s where you're talking about how you're going to learn and who you're going to learn from. So I would say in the mentor section, you want to highlight specific things like, do your mentors have experience in the thing they need to teach you? Do they have experience teaching people like you, right? So most mentor CVs should have a list of their mentees, but you should make one for them if you haven't done it, if they don't have it. And there you can use that as evidence that these people know how to be a mentor, right? Here are the last 30 clinical fellows that have come through this person's lab, and this is where they are today. This person has gotten 10 R01s, this person, right? So prove to the reviewers that you've chosen a team that has the skills that you need to learn. And the mentor's letter must outline their thoughts on what you need, right? So make sure that that you have a lot of input into writing that letter. Or you could even go as far as drafting the letter and then working with your mentor to finalize it. I mentioned this a little bit before, but even in this section, you want to highlight how you'll develop a line of work that is related but independent of the primary mentor. So since the goal is to make sure you're independent, how can the reviewers be sure you just won't be working in the mentor's lab forever? That you're going to get your own R01s, right? what's the transition plan to have you leave the nest, as it were. Um, Generally, picking names out of a hat for mentors is frowned upon. So that means you have to show that you have some relationship with that mentor to give some credibility to the idea that they're actually going to spend their time to help you. Because remember, you're not going to put mentors' time on your grant as a budget line item. So really what that means is that the reviewers have to have some faith that this person is going to spend their quote unquote free time or whatever to help you. So show your established relationships. What are the papers that you've done together? What are the abstracts, even an abstract, right? Here's a project that we've done together. This is how I know this person. This is how long I've known them. This is why we have an established relationship. Um, you know, like in my case, I wrote, I already meet with my mentor once a month. This will increase to twice a month during the K or something like that. So you're showing, hey, not only are we already chatting, but that's going to get even more frequent during the period of this career development grant. So what this means is that you might need to build the relationships with your mentors early in the process, right? Like a year before you're planning to apply so that you have time to think of a project together, do it, get on each other's papers, work together on something so that you can prove that established relationship. Uh, some weaknesses that I think that were talked about in versions of my career development grants. One thing that you could that has been feedback is like, while the expertise of each mentor is described, the application would benefit from more specific description of the skill sets that the candidate will learn from each mentor, how that fits into the training plan, and how often you'll meet with each member of the committee. Again, all has to fit, right? I'm going to learn image processing. I'm going to learn image processing from this person who knows image processing. I'm going to use image processing in my project, and this is how frequently I'm going to talk to this person about image processing, right? Make sure that the biosketch for your mentors represents the skill that they will teach you, and align the mentors to your needed skills, right? Adding, a lot of times there will be people on the grant in the mentor team, and you're like, why are they there, right? What specific skill are they going to teach you? Are there three people who all do the same thing? If so, do you need all three people? Why are all three people there? Um, don't make it confusing, right? Try to make it so that it makes sense why these people are involved with you. Okay, let's talk about the environment and institutional commitment to the candidate. So this is the section where your division chief or department chair will write a letter, and that letter should be as specific as possible, right? And it should say, how can we convince the NIH or the reviewer panel that we are really invested in this investigator, right? So the letter should be very specific, and it should also outline where additional funding will come from. Because remember, the K grants provide not so much research support. Their goal is to protect your time. And so usually that extra budget comes from the mentor's budget, right? Oh, we're going to pay for, or it comes from your division. Like in my case, my division chiefs pay for the MRI time that we need or things like that. So you should outline funding, that there's a plan for space for you, right? If you're doing wet lab research, you need a wet lab. You need space to do it. You need places for your lab tech to sit. You need equipment, right? The institutional commitment letter should outline all the commitment the institution is making for you. And then also, what's the plan for promotion, right? If are you going to be instructor for some years? Are you going to be assistant professor? When? What are the criteria for promotion? So this is a discussion that you need to have with your boss and the department chair and say, hey, how can we craft this so that it looks very compelling? And again, there might be times where you decide, hey, I'm going to make a draft of this thing, and then let's use that as a starting point for the negotiation with the boss. Um, Here are some examples that texts that I have seen in uh, uh, um, some of the institutional letters, knowing that the faculty position and research funding are not contingent on this award. For whatever reason, that kind of idea of like saying, hey, it would be great that if this candidate got the K, but guess what? I am so invested in this person. I think they're so great that even if they don't get the K, I'm going to provide them with the support anyway. I think that's a powerful statement for career development grants, right? Uh, we are recruiting or have recruited with increasing Dr. X's research time in mind. So let's say you are an intensive care physician, you're going to go from 100% clinical time to 25% clinical time. Well, who's going to do the other 75% of that job, right? So I think in the institutional commitment letter, if you say, hey, we have a plan for this, suggesting that if this person actually gets funded, we will actually give them 75% protected time, right? That is another powerful statement. And then remember, many of you hopefully will exceed the NIH salary cap. So knowing that the division will cover the difference, or the department or whomever will cover the difference between the salary and the NIH salary cap also means that these people just believe in you so much that they're putting their money where their mouth is and saying, oh yeah, this person's great, right? Because the best recommendation is I will pay for this person to do their research. And so I think the summary here is, have they committed the time, money, and space for you? For instance, for my project, we wrote, I'll have unrestricted access to the MRI machine, which was true. And so that helps, right? I don't have to barter. We don't have to fight about that. Like, we have it in writing, the commitment that if I need MRI time to get MRIs done, we'll get MRI time to get MRIs done. Or how do you have access to the clinical patients that you need? For instance, if you're doing a genetic cardiomyopathy study and you run the genetic cardiomyopathy clinic, or your mentor does, great. Then that way it seems they can get all the needed patients. All right, so that's my overview. I hope that's of some help. Thanks.